Detective Riley Thompson had been up since 5 in the morning. She'd pushed through an intense workout at the gym, the kind that left her muscles aching in that good way that told her she'd earned her breakfast. Now, still wearing her gray tank top and black leggings, she was making a quick stop at the gas station before heading home to shower and get ready for her shift. The black SUV she drove was nothing fancy on the outside, but it was government-issued and built like a tank. Most people wouldn't look twice at it. She pulled up to pump number 7, swiped her card, and started filling the tank while scrolling through her phone. It was a normal Tuesday morning, or at least it was supposed to be. She had just replaced the nozzle and was about to get back in her car when she heard the sirens. 2 patrol cars came rushing into the gas station parking lot, their lights flashing red and blue against the early morning sky. Riley's training kicked in immediately. She assessed the situation in seconds, looking around to see if there was some kind of emergency nearby. But then both cars screeched to a stop directly behind her vehicle, boxing her in. 4 officers jumped out, and Riley felt her stomach drop as she realized they were focused on her. One of them, a stocky man with a reddish face and close-cropped gray hair, had his hand resting on his weapon. His partner, younger and lankier, moved to the passenger side of her SUV. "Step away from the vehicle." "Hands where I can see them," the older officer barked. Riley's heart was pounding, but she kept her face calm. She raised her hand slowly, making sure every movement was visible and non-threatening. Years of training had taught her how to handle tense situations, but being on this side of it felt completely different. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, keeping her voice steady and respectful. "The problem is you're driving a stolen vehicle," the older officer said, moving closer. His nameplate read Officer Brennan. "Now step away from the car and keep those hands up." Riley blinked, certain she'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "This car isn't stolen. There must be some mistake." "That's what they all say," Brennan's partner chimed in, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Just step away from the vehicle, ma'am." She did as they asked, moving slowly to the side. Her mind was racing now, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. The vehicle was properly registered to her federal agency. The plates were current. There was no reason for this stop unless someone had made a serious error in their system. "Officers, if you run the plates, you'll see this vehicle is registered to a federal agency," Riley explained, trying to keep the frustration out of her voice. "I work for the government. This is my assigned vehicle." Officer Brennan let out a short laugh. "Oh, you work for the government?" "Doing what exactly?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of my position, but I can assure you this vehicle is properly registered and assigned to me." The younger officer was peering through her windows now, his hands cupped around his eyes to see inside. "That's a pretty creative story. You come up with that yourself, or did someone coach you?" By now, a few people had started to notice what was happening. A woman pumping gas at the next island over had her phone out, clearly recording. A man getting coffee inside the station store had stopped at the window to watch. Riley could see more people gathering, some of them pulling out their phones too. She took a slow breath. "I understand you're doing your job, but I'm telling you the truth. If you contact your dispatch and run a proper check, you'll see I'm authorized to drive this vehicle." "Put your hands on the hood," Brennan ordered, ignoring her completely. "Spread your feet apart." Riley felt a wave of humiliation wash over her as she complied. Here she was, a federal agent who'd spent the last 8 years serving her country, being treated like a common criminal at a gas station, while strangers recorded the whole thing. But she knew better than to resist or argue too forcefully. She'd seen too many situations escalate because someone felt disrespected or challenged. The metal hood was still warm from the drive as she placed her palms flat against it. Behind her, she could hear the officers talking in low voices, probably deciding what to do next. She heard one of them radio in to run the plates, but she couldn't make out the full conversation. "So where'd you steal it from?" the younger officer asked, walking around to face her. "Somebody's driveway." "Parking lot." Riley kept her eyes forward, refusing to engage with the mockery in his voice. "I didn't steal anything. This is my assigned vehicle." Right, the government vehicle. For your government job," Brennan said, coming around to her other side. "You know how many times we hear stories like that? Everybody's got an excuse. It's not an excuse. It's the truth." "Then you won't mind if we take a look inside, will you?" Riley knew they needed probable cause or her permission to search the vehicle, but she also knew that arguing about constitutional rights right now would only make things worse. "Do what you need to do, but you're making a mistake. She heard her car door open, then the sound of her belongings being moved around. Her gym bag from the back seat. The water bottle she'd left in the cup holder. They weren't being gentle about it either. She heard something hit the pavement and roll away. "Nice bag," one of them commented. "Expensive taste for someone who steals cars." The crowd around them was growing. Riley could hear murmurs, snippets of conversation. Someone said something about how wrong this looked. Another voice said they were recording everything. A teenager asked his mother if the woman had really stolen a car, and the mother shushed him. This was exactly what Riley had spent her career trying to prevent. Not the traffic stop itself, but the assumptions, the prejudice, the way these officers had decided who she was the moment they saw her. A black woman in workout clothes driving a nice SUV must be up to no good. Must have stolen it. Couldn't possibly be the legitimate owner or driver. She'd dealt with skepticism before. People who didn't expect someone who looked like her to be in her position. The double takes when she showed her credentials. The questions that came just a beat too slow. As if people needed an extra moment to reconcile what they were seeing with what they'd expected. But this was different. This was public, humiliating, and completely unjust. "You know what I think?" Brennan said, walking back to stand in front of her. "I think you saw a nice car. Figured you'd take it for a joyride, maybe make a quick buck selling it. Probably thought you'd get away with it too." Riley's jaw tightened. She wanted to tell him exactly what she thought of his assumptions. She wanted to demand a supervisor right now. She wanted to ask him if he'd be treating her this way if she were white. But she swallowed all of that down and kept her voice level. "Officer Brennan, I'm asking you again to run a proper check on this vehicle and verify my identity. You're making a serious mistake here." "The only mistake being made here is yours, sweetheart," he replied. And that word, delivered with such casual condescension, made something snap inside her. She was done playing nice. She was done being patient with people who'd already decided who she was without knowing a single thing about her. It was time to show them exactly who they were dealing with. Riley stood with her hands pressed against the hood of her SUV, watching more and more people gather around the gas station. Some were still pumping gas but had stopped to stare. Others had come out of the convenience store with their morning coffee forgotten in their hands. Almost everyone had their phones out now, recording from different angles. She could hear Officer Brennan talking to his partner behind her, their voices low but not quite low enough. They were discussing whether to handcuff her right away or wait for backup, as if she was some kind of dangerous criminal who might make a run for it at any second. "Ma'am, I need you to interlace your fingers behind your head," the younger officer instructed. Riley turned her head slightly. "Am I under arrest?" "Just do what you're told and we won't have any problems." She slowly moved her hands from the hood to behind her head, lacing her fingers together. The position made her shoulders ache, still sore from her workout. But more than the physical discomfort, it was the psychological weight of it all. The humiliation of being treated this way in public. The frustration of not being heard. The anger at being profiled based on nothing but her appearance. A woman's voice called out from the crowd. "Hey, why don't you actually listen to what she's saying?" Officer Brennan turned toward the voice. "Ma'am, please step back. This is police business." "My police business? Looks like harassment to me," another voice added. Brennan's face reddened. "If you folks don't clear the area, I'll have to cite you for interfering with an investigation." But nobody moved. If anything, more people seemed to be pulling into the gas station. Word apparently spreading on social media about what was happening. Riley could hear snippets of conversation around her. Someone was live streaming on their phone. Another person was calling someone to tell them about the scene unfolding. The younger officer came around to face Riley again. "So, you want to tell us how you really got this car? Maybe you borrowed it from someone? A boyfriend? Employer?" "I've already told you. It's my assigned vehicle." He shook his head, a condescending smile on his face. "See, that's the thing. People who actually drive government vehicles usually have, identification. Credentials. Something official looking. All you've got is a gym membership card and an attitude." Riley's eyes flashed. "I haven't shown you anything yet because you haven't asked properly. You've been too busy making assumptions." "Assumptions?" Brennan laughed as he walked over. "Lady, the assumptions are pretty clear. You're driving a vehicle that's way above your pay grade. You can't provide any proof of ownership or authorization, and you're getting defensive when we ask simple questions." "Way above my pay grade?" Riley repeated slowly. "And how exactly do you know what my pay grade is, officer?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Brennan's jaw worked as he tried to come up with a response that wouldn't sound as bad as what he was clearly thinking. His partner jumped in instead. Come on. You're in workout clothes at a gas station at 7 in the morning. No offense, but you don't exactly look like someone who drives a $40,000 SUV. There it was. The real reason for all of this. Not because the vehicle was actually stolen. Not because they had any real evidence of a crime. But because she didn't look like what they thought she should look like to be driving this car. Riley felt her anger rising, but she kept it locked down tight. Getting emotional now would only make things worse. They'd use it as an excuse to say she was being aggressive or uncooperative. She'd seen it happen too many times to other people who looked like her. Officer, are you saying that my appearance is the reason for this stop? I'm saying that things don't add up, Brennan replied. And when things don't add up, we investigate. That's our job. Then investigate properly. Run the plates. Contact the agency. Do your actual job instead of profiling me. The younger officer laughed outright at that. Profiling. That's rich. We're responding to a possible stolen vehicle. That's not profiling, that's police work. Is it, though? A man in a business suit had stepped forward from the crowd. Because I've been watching this whole thing and I haven't heard you mention anything about a stolen vehicle report. Did someone call this in? Or did you just see her and decide something was wrong? Brennan pointed at the man. Sir, I won't tell you again. Step back. I'm not interfering. I'm just asking a question that I think we'd all like answered. More murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Riley could feel the dynamic starting to shift. These officers had expected this to be quick and easy. Stop the woman, scare her a little, maybe get credit for recovering a stolen vehicle. But now they had witnesses, cameras, and people asking uncomfortable questions. Brennan grabbed his radio. Dispatch, we need another unit at the Chevron on Route 50. We've got crowd control issues. While he was distracted with the radio, the younger officer decided to continue searching Riley's vehicle. She heard him opening the glove compartment, rustling through papers. Then he moved to the back, opening the rear hatch. Nothing back here but gym equipment and some water bottles, he called out. Wait, what's this? Riley's heart skipped. She knew exactly what was back there, tucked in a secure compartment that he shouldn't have been able to access without the right key. But he must have found the release latch. Well, the officer said, his voice taking on a triumphant tone. We've got a lockbox back here, and it's sealed up pretty tight. What do you think is in here? Riley closed her eyes for a brief moment. This was getting out of hand fast. Officer, that's a secure federal lockbox. You don't have authorization to open it. A federal lockbox? He laughed again. In a stolen car? That's good. That's real good. The car isn't stolen, and you need to stop this search right now. You're violating protocol. The only thing being violated here is the law, Brennan said, walking back over. And you're the one doing it. Now you can either give us the combination to that lockbox or we'll have it opened at the station. Riley took a deep breath. She had tried to handle this calmly. She had tried to give them multiple opportunities to do the right thing, to check their facts, to verify her identity. But they were so convinced they were right, so certain that they had caught someone in the act that they weren't listening to anything she said. The crowd was getting louder now. Someone yelled that this was taking too long for a simple traffic stop. Another person pointed out that the officers hadn't even explained what law she'd supposedly broken. A teenager asked loudly why they needed 4 cops for one woman who was clearly cooperating. All right, that's it, Brennan said, reaching for his handcuffs. You're coming down to the station. We'll sort all this out there. As he approached, Riley made a decision. She'd been patient long enough. She'd given them every chance to handle this professionally. Now it was time to remind them that they weren't the only ones with authority here. Officer Brennan, she said, her voice cutting through the noise with a clarity that made several people in the crowd go quiet. Before you make the biggest mistake of your career, I strongly suggest you run my name through your database. My full name is Riley Alexandra Thompson. Run it through the federal system, not just your local database. Something in her tone made him pause. His hand hovered over the handcuffs on his belt. For the first time since this whole thing started, she saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. And why would I do that? He asked, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Riley turned her head to look him directly in the eye. Because in about 5 minutes, you're going to wish you had done this 20 minutes ago. Run my name, do it now. Unless you want to explain to your captain why you arrested a federal agent in front of 50 witnesses with their cameras rolling. The younger officer scoffed. Federal agent? What are you, FBI? Riley didn't answer. She just kept her eyes locked on Brennan, watching as the wheels turned in his head. He'd heard something in her voice, something that didn't match the narrative he'd built in his mind. And now with all these cameras and all these witnesses, he was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, he should double-check his facts. Fine, he finally said, reaching for his radio. Dispatch, run a name for me. Officer Brennan spoke into his radio, his voice steady, but Riley could detect the slight edge of uncertainty creeping in. Dispatch, I need you to run a name through the federal database. Last name Thompson, first name Riley, middle name Alexandra. The radio crackled with static. Copy that. Give me a few minutes. Those few minutes felt like hours. Riley remained in her position, hands still interlaced behind her head, even though her shoulders were screaming in protest now. She wasn't going to give these officers any excuse to claim she was being uncooperative or resistant. Every move she made was deliberate, controlled, and visible to the dozens of cameras pointed in her direction. The younger officer had stepped back from the vehicle, standing awkwardly near the rear bumper. He kept glancing at his partner, then at Riley, then back at Brennan. The confidence that had been rolling off him earlier was starting to evaporate. He'd clearly picked up on the shift in atmosphere, too. The crowd had grown even larger. Cars were backing up at the gas pumps because people didn't want to leave until they saw how this played out. The owner of the gas station had come out, a middle-aged man with worried eyes, probably concerned about the scene affecting his business. But even he stood there watching, his arms crossed over his chest. How long does a database check take? Someone in the crowd called out. Brennan ignored the question. He was staring at Riley now, really looking at her for the first time. She could see him taking in details he'd probably missed before, the way she carried herself, the calm in her eyes despite the situation, the deliberate precision in every movement she made. These weren't the behaviors of someone who'd stolen a car and gotten caught. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Riley's phone, which had been sitting in the cup holder of her car, started ringing. The sound cut through the tense silence. Brennan walked over and looked at the screen. It's a 202 area code, he said. Washington, D.C. You should probably answer that, Riley said calmly. Put it on speaker. Brennan hesitated, then picked up the phone and swiped to answer, hitting the speaker button. Hello? A woman's voice came through, crisp and professional. This is Director Chen from the United States Secret Service. To whom am I speaking? The younger officer's face went pale. Brennan swallowed hard before answering. This is Officer Michael Brennan with the County Police Department. Officer Brennan, I've been alerted that one of my agents has been detained at your location. I need you to explain to me right now why Special Agent Riley Thompson is being held at a gas station instead of being allowed to go about her day. The words hit like a physical blow. Special Agent, United States Secret Service. Every person in that crowd heard it. The phones that had been recording captured every second of it, and Officer Brennan looked like he wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. Ma'am, there was a report of a stolen vehicle. A report from whom? Director Chen's voice was ice cold. Because I'm looking at our records right now, and that vehicle is registered to Agent Thompson's unit. It's a federal vehicle assigned to her for official use. So I'll ask you again, officer. Why is my agent being detained? Brennan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His partner had actually taken a step backward, as if trying to distance himself from the whole situation. Riley would have felt sorry for them if they hadn't spent the last 30 minutes treating her like a criminal and ignoring everything she'd said. The radio on Brennan's belt suddenly crackled to life. Unit 12, this is dispatch. We've got your information on Riley Alexandra Thompson. Brennan grabbed his radio with his free hand, still holding Riley's phone in the other. Go ahead, dispatch. Sir, showing Riley Thompson as a federal employee with the United States Secret Service. She's listed as a special agent in the Presidential Protection Division. The vehicle registered to that unit matches the plates you called in earlier. No wants, no warrants, no flags of any kind. Vehicle is not stolen. Repeat, vehicle is not stolen. You could have heard a pin drop in that gas station parking lot. Every eye was on Officer Brennan, watching as the reality of what he'd done crashed down on him. He'd just publicly humiliated and illegally detained a federal agent in front of dozens of witnesses, all while accusing her of stealing her own government-issued vehicle. Riley slowly lowered her hands from behind her head. rolling her shoulders to work out the stiffness. She turned to face Brennan, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp as steel. "Officer Brennan," she said quietly, "I'm going to reach into my pocket now to retrieve my credentials. I'm telling you this because I want every movement I make to be clear and documented. Are we understood?" He nodded mutely, still holding her phone. Director Chen's voice came through again. "Officer, I'm still on the line. I want to speak with Agent Thompson immediately." Riley reached into the pocket of her leggings and pulled out a slim leather case. She opened it carefully, holding it up so that everyone could see. The gold badge of the United States Secret Service gleamed in the morning sunlight. Next to it was her official identification card, complete with her photo, her rank, and the seal of the service. A ripple went through the crowd. Someone let out a low whistle. Another person said something that sounded like, "I knew it." The teenager who'd been watching earlier turned to his mother and said, "Mom, she's actually Secret Service." "That's so cool." Riley took her phone from Brennan's unresisting hand and took it off speaker, holding it to her ear. "Director Chen, this is Thompson." She walked a few steps away from the officers, speaking in a low voice that the crowd couldn't hear. But her body language said everything. She was calm, professional, and clearly reporting what had happened. After about 2 minutes, she ended the call and walked back to where Brennan and his partner were standing. "Director Chen has some concerns about how this situation was handled," Riley said, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "She'll be contacting your department's chief within the hour. But before that happens, I need your names and badge numbers. Both of you." The younger officer stammered out his information first. His name was Officer David Palmer, badge number 2847. Brennan followed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Badge number 1923. Riley pulled out her own phone and typed the information into her notes app. Then she looked around at the crowd, many of whom were still recording. "I want to say something to everyone who's been watching this," she said, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "What you witnessed here today is something that happens far too often. People get stopped, detained, and treated as criminals based on nothing more than how they look, or what someone assumes about them based on their appearance." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I was lucky today. Lucky that I had credentials to prove who I was. Lucky that I had the training to stay calm under pressure. Lucky that I knew my rights and could demand they be respected. But not everyone has that. Not everyone gets to pull out a badge and watch the whole situation change in an instant." A woman in the crowd nodded vigorously. Others murmured in agreement. Riley continued, "I'm grateful to all of you for staying here, for recording what happened, for being witnesses. Your presence here mattered. It always matters. When you see something that doesn't look right, don't just walk away. Stay, watch, record, hold people accountable, whether they're wearing a badge or not." She turned back to Brennan and Palmer. "I want a copy of your incident report. I want the names of everyone who was involved in this decision to stop me. And I want to know exactly what report of a stolen vehicle you were supposedly responding to, because I have a strong suspicion that no such report exists." Brennan found his voice again, though it was shaky. "Agent Thompson, we made a mistake. I apologize." Riley looked at him for a long moment. "Officer Brennan, your apology means nothing if nothing changes. You saw a black woman in casual clothes driving a nice car, and you immediately assumed something was wrong. You didn't check your facts first. You didn't listen when I tried to tell you the truth. You mocked me and dismissed everything I said." She gestured to the crowd around them. "All these people saw it. They heard how you spoke to me. They watched you treat me like I was less than human. An apology doesn't erase that." Palmer looked like he might be sick. Brennan's face had gone from red to an ashy gray color. In the distance, Riley could hear more sirens approaching. The sirens grew louder, and within moments 2 more patrol cars pulled into the gas station. But these weren't coming in hot with lights flashing and aggressive energy. They pulled in slowly, almost cautiously. From the first car emerged a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and a crisp uniform that marked him as someone with authority. The silver bars on his collar identified him as a captain. Riley watched as Officer Brennan's entire body language changed. His shoulders slumped. His hand went up to rub the back of his neck, a nervous gesture that showed just how much trouble he knew he was in. Palmer looked even worse, his face drained of all color as the captain approached. "Which one of you is Agent Thompson?" the captain asked, his eyes scanning the scene. Riley stepped forward, her credentials still in her hand. That would be me, sir. The captain looked at her badge, then at her face, then back at the two officers who'd stopped her. His jaw tightened, and Riley could see him doing the mental calculations of just how bad this situation was. A federal agent, detained illegally, in front of what looked like 50 witnesses, all with their phones out. Captain Dennis Walsh, he said, extending his hand to Riley. Agent Thompson, I cannot express how sorry I am about this incident. I got a call from your director about 3 minutes ago, and let me tell you, that was not a pleasant conversation. Riley shook his hand but didn't smile. I imagine it wasn't, Captain Walsh. Your officers here have spent the last 30 minutes accusing me of stealing my own vehicle, searching it without proper cause, and treating me like a criminal despite my repeated attempts to explain the situation. Walsh turned to Brennan and Palmer, his expression hardening. Is this true? Brennan opened his mouth to speak, but Palmer jumped in first. Sir, we received information that the vehicle might be stolen, and we were just following protocol. Stop. Walsh held up his hand. Just stop talking. What information? Who called it in? The two officers exchanged glances. The silence stretched out uncomfortably long. Riley crossed her arms, waiting. She already knew the answer, but she wanted to hear them admit it. There wasn't a specific call, Brennan finally admitted. The vehicle matched a description from a bulletin last week about stolen SUVs in the area. A bulletin from last week? Walsh repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. A general bulletin about stolen SUVs? And based on that, you pulled over a federal agent, detained her, searched her vehicle, and refused to verify her identity when she asked you to multiple times. We did run the plates, sir, Palmer said weakly. But they came back registered to a government agency with restricted information, and we thought... You thought what, exactly? Riley interrupted, her voice sharp. You thought that was suspicious? That a government vehicle would be registered to a government agency? Or did you think that maybe, just maybe, you should verify things a little more carefully before treating someone like a criminal? Walsh held up his hand again. Agent Thompson, please. Let me handle my officers. With all due respect, Captain, I'm not sure you understand the full scope of what happened here. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity or overzealous police work. Your officers profiled me. Officer Palmer literally said I didn't look like someone who should be driving a vehicle like this. They made assumptions based on my appearance, based on the fact that I was in workout clothes at a gas station in the morning, and when I tried to tell them the truth, they laughed at me. A woman from the crowd called out, "She's right." I recorded the whole thing. They were mocking her the entire time. Several other voices chimed in with agreement. Someone yelled that they'd already posted the video online and it was getting thousands of views. Another person said they'd sent their footage to the local news station. Walsh's face had gone pale now, too. This wasn't just an internal matter anymore. This was about to become a public relations nightmare for his department. Agent Thompson, please, can we talk about this privately? No, Riley said firmly. Everything that happened here happened in public in front of all these witnesses. Whatever comes next should be public, too. These people deserve to know what accountability looks like. An older man in the crowd started clapping. Others joined in. Riley felt a surge of emotion but kept it locked down. She couldn't afford to break down now. Couldn't let them see how much this had affected her. She had to stay strong, stay professional, stay in control. Walsh took a deep breath and turned back to his officers. Brennan, Palmer, I'm placing both of you on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation into this incident. Hand over your badges and weapons now. Palmer looked like he might cry. Captain, please, this is the consequence of your actions, Walsh cut him off. You detained a federal agent without cause. You conducted an illegal search. You ignored proper protocol. And based on what I'm hearing from these witnesses, you did all of this because you made assumptions about someone based on how they looked. Do you have any idea how serious this is? Brennan slowly unclipped his badge from his uniform and handed it over. His gun followed. Palmer did the same, his hands shaking. Both men looked utterly defeated, and Riley felt a complicated mix of emotions watching them. Part of her felt vindicated. They'd treated her terribly, and now they were facing consequences. But another part of her just felt tired. Tired of having to prove herself. Tired of being judged. Tired of the fact that this kind of thing kept happening to people who looked like her. Captain Walsh, Riley said, her voice softer now. I'm going to be filing an official complaint with your department and with the Civil Rights Division. I'm also going to recommend that your department implement mandatory training on racial bias and proper protocol for interacting with federal agents and government vehicles. Walsh nodded. I understand, and I'll personally ensure that happens. Agent Thompson, is there anything else you need from us right now? Riley looked at her SUV, her belongings scattered on the ground where the officers had carelessly tossed them during their search. Her gym bag was lying in a puddle. Her water bottle had rolled under the gas pump. The contents of her glove compartment were spread across the passenger seat. I need someone to help me gather my things that your officers threw around like garbage, and I need a copy of the incident report, the dashboard camera footage from both patrol cars, and the names of everyone involved in the decision to stop me. I want all of that delivered to my office by end of business today. You'll have it, Walsh promised. Officers Brennan and Palmer, help Agent Thompson collect her belongings carefully. The two men moved forward reluctantly, and Riley directed them to her gym bag and other items. They picked everything up gingerly as if the items might explode, and placed them back in her vehicle. The whole time the crowd watched in silence. It was a reversal of power that everyone could feel. The men who'd been so confident and dismissive 30 minutes ago were now servants, following orders from the woman they'd humiliated. When everything was back in her car, Riley turned to address the crowd one more time. I want to thank all of you again for staying, for recording, for being witnesses. What you did here matters more than you know. Change doesn't happen in the dark. It happens when people shine a light on injustice and refuse to look away. She pulled out her phone and held it up. I'm going to share my contact information with anyone who recorded what happened today. If you're willing to send me your footage, it could help ensure that real change happens, not just in this department, but in others as well. Several people rushed forward, eager to share their videos. Riley took down names and numbers, promising to follow up with each of them. A few people wanted to take pictures with her, and though she was exhausted and emotionally drained, she agreed. These people had stood up for her when she needed it most. One young black girl, maybe 13 or 14 years old, approached shyly. Excuse me, ma'am. Are you really Secret Service? Riley smiled at her, a genuine smile this time. I really am. That's so cool, the girl breathed. I didn't know black women could be Secret Service agents. Riley's heart clenched. She knelt down so she was at eye level with the girl. We can be anything we want to be. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You see what happened here today? Those officers tried to tell me I didn't belong in that car, that I didn't look like someone who should have what I have. But they were wrong. And anyone who tries to tell you that you can't do something because of how you look or where you come from, they're wrong too. The girl's mother, standing behind her, had tears in her eyes. Thank you, she mouthed to Riley. Captain Walsh approached as the crowd began to disperse. Agent Thompson, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I truly am sorry for what happened today. I'll make sure there are real consequences and real changes. Riley stood up and faced him. I hope you mean that, Captain. Because this can't keep happening. Not to me. Not to anyone. 3 weeks had passed since that morning at the gas station, and Riley's life had changed in ways she never expected. The video of her encounter with officers Brennan and Palmer had gone viral, racking up over 15 million views across various social media platforms. News outlets had picked up the story, and suddenly Riley Thompson was a name that people across the country recognized. She sat in a television studio in New York, preparing for her third interview that week. The makeup artist was touching up her face while the producer went over the segment timing. Riley had never imagined herself as someone who'd be on national television, but here she was, using her unexpected platform to talk about something that mattered. 2 minutes, Agent Thompson, the producer said with a smile. Riley took a deep breath and thought back to everything that had happened since that day. The police department's internal affairs investigation had moved quickly, probably because of all the public attention. Officer Brennan had been suspended without pay for 6 months and was required to complete extensive training on bias, proper protocol, and de-escalation before he could return to duty. Officer Palmer had been given a similar suspension, though his was only 4 months given his shorter time on the force. But more importantly, the department had implemented real changes. Every officer was now required to complete a comprehensive 40-hour training program on racial bias and cultural sensitivity. New protocols were put in place for how officers should handle stops involving government vehicles and federal employees. Dashboard cameras were now mandatory in all patrol cars, and the footage would be automatically uploaded to a secure server that couldn't be tampered with. Captain Walsh had kept his word. He'd called Riley personally twice to update her on the changes and to ask for her input on the new training programs. She'd been impressed by his genuine commitment to making things better, even though she knew that none of these changes would have happened if her incident hadn't gone viral. "We're ready for you, Agent Thompson," a stagehand said, gesturing toward the set. Riley walked out to applause from the studio audience and took her seat across from the host, a woman named Catherine Reynolds, who was known for her thoughtful interviews. "Agent Thompson, thank you so much for being here," Catherine began. "Your story has resonated with millions of people across the country. How are you doing?" Riley smiled, though there was a weight behind it. "I'm doing well, Catherine. It's been overwhelming in a lot of ways, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to turn a negative experience into something positive." "Let's talk about that experience. When those officers first stopped you, what was going through your mind?" Riley thought carefully before answering. "At first I thought it was just a mistake. A mix-up that would get cleared up quickly once I explained the situation. But as it went on, as they continued to dismiss everything I said and treat me like a criminal, I realized this was about more than just a misunderstanding. They'd made assumptions about who I was based on how I looked, and nothing I said was going to change their minds until I could prove them wrong with my credentials." "You stayed remarkably calm throughout the ordeal," Catherine observed. "Was that difficult?" "It was one of the hardest things I've ever done," Riley admitted. "I was angry. I was humiliated. I wanted to yell at them, to demand they treat me with respect. But I knew that if I showed any emotion, if I raised my voice or made any sudden movements, it could escalate the situation in dangerous ways. That's a reality that a lot of people, especially people of color, have to live with every single day." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Catherine leaned forward. "You said something powerful to the crowd that day about being lucky. Can you elaborate on that?" Riley nodded. "I was lucky because I had credentials that could prove who I was. I had training that helped me stay calm. I knew my rights and I could demand they be respected. But think about all the people who don't have those advantages. What happens to them when they're profiled and stopped? What happens when they tell the truth and nobody believes them? Not everyone gets to flash a badge and watch the whole dynamic shift. Since your story went viral, have you heard from other people with similar experiences?" "Thousands of them," Riley said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've gotten messages from teachers, doctors, lawyers, business owners, students, all kinds of people who've been profiled and treated like criminals because of how they look. Their stories break my heart because I know that most of them will never get the justice or recognition they deserve." Catherine pulled out a tablet. "I want to share something with you. Since your incident, there's been a grassroots movement to implement similar training programs in police departments across the country. 17 cities have already committed to policy changes. How does that make you feel?" Riley felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "It makes me feel hopeful, but it also reminds me how much work we still have to do. This shouldn't have taken a viral video for people to pay attention. These problems have existed for decades, for generations. We need sustained effort and commitment, not just reactions to whatever incident happens to catch the public's attention." The interview continued for another 10 minutes, covering everything from Riley's career path to her advice for young people facing discrimination. When it wrapped up, the audience gave her a standing ovation. As Riley walked off the set, her phone was already buzzing with messages. One was from Director Chen. "Excellent interview. The service is proud of you." Another was from Captain Walsh. "Thank you for continuing to speak up. We're learning from this every day." But the message that made her smile was from the young girl she'd met at the gas station. Her mother had helped her write it. "Dear Agent Thompson, I watched you on TV today. You inspired me to be brave. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. Thank you for showing me what's possible." 2 months later, Riley was invited to speak at a law enforcement conference in Washington. She stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of police officers, chiefs, and sheriffs from departments all over the country. This was intimidating in a different way than facing down Officers Brennan and Palmer. These were people who might resent being lectured about bias and proper protocol. But as she began to speak, sharing not just her own story but the stories of the thousands of people who'd reached out to her, she saw something shift in the room. Officers were nodding. Some were taking notes. A few had tears in their eyes. She wasn't attacking them. She was asking them to be better, to see the humanity in every person they encountered, to question their assumptions before acting on them. After her speech, dozens of officers came up to thank her. One older cop with 30 years on the force shook her hand and said, "You made me think about some stops I've made over the years differently. I'm going to do better." That evening, Riley drove home in her government SUV, the same one she'd been accused of stealing. She thought about how one terrible morning had somehow transformed into a movement for change. She thought about the young girl who wanted to be like her, and all the other kids who might see new possibilities because of what happened. Her phone rang. It was Officer Palmer. She'd given him her number after the incident, telling him that if he was serious about learning and growing, she'd be willing to talk. They'd spoken a few times since then, difficult conversations about bias and accountability. "Agent Thompson." His voice was hesitant. "I just wanted to let you know that I completed the advanced training program. And I've been working with community groups trying to understand perspectives I never considered before. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to be better." "That's good to hear," Riley said, and she meant it. Real change comes from people being willing to acknowledge their mistakes and put in the work to do better. Keep it up. After she hung up, Riley thought about forgiveness and accountability, about how they weren't opposites but partners in the work of making things better. She thought about how justice wasn't just about punishment but about transformation. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at her Secret Service credentials on the seat beside her. She'd spent 8 years earning that badge, proving herself over and over again, and she'd keep proving herself, not because she had to, but because the work mattered. Her story had become bigger than just one bad encounter at a gas station. It had become a conversation about dignity, about respect, about seeing people as individuals rather than stereotypes. It had sparked changes in police departments across the country. It had inspired young people to dream bigger. It had opened doors for difficult but necessary conversations about race, power, and justice. Riley knew the work wasn't done. One viral video and a few policy changes weren't going to solve systemic problems that had existed for generations. But it was a start, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. A start, a crack in the wall, a seed planted that might grow into something more. She got out of her car, gathered her things, and walked into her house. Tomorrow she'd go back to her job protecting the nation's leaders. But tonight she'd rest, knowing that she'd used her voice and her platform to protect something even more important: the dignity and rights of people everywhere who deserve to be seen, heard, and treated with respect. The gas station incident would always be a part of her story, but it wouldn't define her. What would define her was what came after, the way she'd turned pain into purpose, the way she'd refused to let anger consume her, the way she'd stood up not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever been judged unfairly, profiled unjustly, or dismissed without being heard. That was the real power of her badge. Not the authority it gave her over others, but the responsibility it placed on her to be a voice for justice, and she'd carry that responsibility with pride every single day.